Hey there, everyone. How are you guys today? Welcome to my Neurofeedback and Chill weekly live stream. Let me see if I can make my little head bigger. Let's see if this is going to work. There we go. I hope everyone's okay. Thanks for showing up and learning about alpha waves tonight, or this morning if you're watching this later, or some other time of day if you're watching this from some other place. If you haven't met me before, my name is Andrew Hill. I'm a neuroscientist who works in a functional capacity, and I teach people to learn about their brains, take control of their brains, demystify their brains, and I work with companies to help provide products and services to do that. And one of them is a company I started years ago called True Brain that makes nootropics, and a company I own now called Peak Brain that does neurofeedback. So every Monday I do a neurofeedback and chill. And tonight I wanted to talk about alpha waves. I can see we already have a great question. Hey, Brian, thanks for the question. Move myself over here. So I usually do some neurofeedback, and while I'm doing neurofeedback, I'll also go into the topic. But tonight I'm actually going to show a little bit of raw brain waves. We'll do some live EEG, but instead of neurofeedback, I wanted to demonstrate some alpha features for you instead. So Brian's question is, what is the significance of persistent eyes open alpha phenotypes, causes and treatments? Are there other neuromodulation, biofeedback, or other interventions that can help? Yeah, so getting right into the meat of it, alpha is an idling rhythm. It's a brainwave that the cortex makes at about 10 cycles per second, 10 hertz. And the job of alpha is to sort of sit between the activated modes, the beta brainwaves, and the more automatic modes, the theta brainwaves, the delta brainwaves. The slow ones are ones that you live in. You don't think in delta. It's the heartbeat of the brain. Theta is the release on circuits, lifting your foot off the gas. Alpha is the neutral. And alpha can be a bunch of things, not just one thing called alpha. Yeah, it's a 10 hertz wave, but really we're talking about brain waves between about 7 and 13, where 10 is sort of a cutoff or a midpoint in alpha. And below that, often conceptualized as 8 to 10 hertz, is alpha 1 or slow alpha or regular alpha. And then at 10 to 12 or 10 to 13, you have fast alpha. And that's a preparatory idle, sort of like the engine revving as it starts to go into a beta mode. So you'll see these different alpha features in the brain in different areas of the cortex. You'll also see that when we turn off or downshift or put into idle different bits of functional cortex, they'll make lots of alpha. So if you close your eyes, the alpha will get big and strong in the visual tissue in theory. I'll show you that in a second. And Brian's question is, when the eyes are open, if that alpha is not going away, if the tissue's not waking up. Now, if it's visual tissue, Brian, maybe it's ADD, old school ADHD PI, inattentive pure, very plausibly. Or something else that might look like it. There's other things that can mimic ADD, including metabolic issues like poisonings or drownings or other stuff that leaves you kind of spacey and shaky. You could have frontal eyes open alpha. That's usually more of a big deal. Depends on where it is. You probably expect some depressive type stuff, maybe some issues with motivation, if it's on the left, that kind of stuff. You can watch my videos on the approach versus the avoid and motivation and mood for that. So I would say that you can train, depending on where it is, you can train it with neurofeedback. You can impact it with supplements. You can impact it with meditation. So I'll go over a lot of that tonight. I've written a short article that I did not yet put into the show notes here at the bottom. I'll link that later on. I often do an article to go along with these videos. And tonight I did a brain dump instead of a true article. So it's got a lot of info in it, but it's a little bit like just chunks of information. So I'm going to pull that up and reference it while I'm talking to you. But I'm going to revise it. I think I might take this video or this topic and do a bit more of a produced narrated video for it that's not a live stream. And so please ask questions so I can figure out what I haven't covered well, and I'll do a little short 10 or 15 minute narrated video for you that encapsulates it. So again, first of all, we're talking about the cortical alpha, the cortex, the bark, the surface of the brain, which is a big chunk of the brain, runs at this 8 to 12 hertz frequency when it's idling, when it's relaxing, essentially. And you'll see that in the visual tissue, especially when the eyes are closed. You can also see sensory processing will shut off alpha. So when you open your eyes and process vision, the alpha goes down. When you hear things, alpha gets suppressed. You know, if you're doing alpha training on somebody and there's some noise in your office, you can see their alphas dip down suddenly in response to noticing some outside world information. It's kind of interesting in that way. Hey, El Chatterino, asking on a PN Whiz, like the blue backgrounds makes the values easier to read. Yeah, that's BioExplorer. We have BioExplorer up tonight. I thought I would show you guys just some EEG, not some neurofeedback. Let me turn off my timer because we've already begun. We are off and running. So let me set that up while I am talking more about alpha. So we can think about alpha in a bunch of ways. The speed of the alpha has a lot to do with how fast the mind is running. And so you can see that the speed will track things like speed of processing. You'll also see that the local areas, local modules like the cingulates or the temporoparietal areas will have their own alpha signatures when they're idling properly or not idling properly. And the big visual tissue will have its alpha, but you also have a broad cortical alpha that's sort of underneath PZ, or the parietal back midline. And so often measuring the alpha back there will get you a sensation of how activated the posterior cingulate is. Because lack of alpha means the posterior cingulate's kind of in high gear. Your lifeguard's looking for sharks in the indoor pool. And if we have no alpha in the front midline, then your anterior cingulate is running around and your CEO is micromanaging. And we call that obsessiveness. You know, I didn't prepare as well as I could have, and I have a lot of tangled wires. Bear with me for a couple seconds. Ask questions and I'll answer them while I'm untangling wires. I need to get 3 wires here for the measurement. I'm just going to measure one location on my head, just the back midline. So I'll put these on as I go. I have some electrode paste here and silver wires, just simple ones. That's all you need, 3 wires for one signal off the head. When you're measuring EEG, you always need a location on the head. You also need something to subtract from it, another location or an ear. And then you also need a ground wire or a 0 point to measure. And the stuff you're getting, the electricity you're getting off the scalp is very low amplitude, very small. And so you have to kind of play those tricks to get a signal. So I put 1 wire on. I'm going to make this I'm using this little amp here. So yeah, El Chatterino, this is a PN Whiz. It's a 4-channel amp. I'm going to use the red minus the black to create my montage or my location. So left ear is going to be the reference. So that's the black socket. My other ear. So you have to untangle these wires and put them away before my cats realize there's wires on the couch, because they may come take them. So bear with me as I pull another wire out. There we go. Yeah, this is the new 4-channel UWiz. Have you not seen these? These are pretty cool. Little 4-channel amp. And then the fun part of these is that we have the HEG socket on the butt there, kind of hidden between the lanyard, either side of the lanyard. But it's a nice little 4-channel amp. I think it might be the lowest cost prosumer versions. They're still kind of expensive. I think they're over $1,000 now for these amps. Something like that. I think the supply chain prices have been going up, so Bruce is having to raise his prices. Yeah, the old UWiz is fine. It's got 2 channels. It works fine for most things. That'd be plenty. Let me see here. This ear clip seems to be on loose. It should be okay. All right, so that's my ground wire. So I have that plugged into the green socket now. And then last, I'm going to stick a wire over the PZ, over the back midline, because that's a big cortical generator of alpha. And I'm just going to pull whatever wire I can pull out and untangle the rest later. There we go. And then hide them before my cats come and insist on a wire tax. All right. So we get a little flat wire here, a little simple one. And since I'm bald, I'm going to put a little dab of paste on the skin, right in the middle. PZ, often there's a flat spot kind of to the back of the head. And PZ is right in the middle of that. It's a cheater way to find it, but it works. So now I have a third wire on. I'm going to plug that into the red socket. So the U-Wiz, actually all the Wiz amps use red minus black for channel 1, blue minus white for channel 2. And these amps also have a third and fourth channel that are yellow and brown that would share the white and black sockets. So they're not totally separate. You can't do like 4 complete separate montages, but it's still fine. And people rarely want to put 8 wires on their head anyways. All right, so now I'm gonna set up the software and show you guys some alpha. So I was talking about cortical alpha and alpha blocking, how the brain can make alpha when you turn off the tissue. So let's see how that looks. Let me turn off my show title here. There we go. All right, so BioExplorer, my amplifier, you can see here it says connected in the bar. You can see in the upper right, it has channels 1, 2, 3, and 4 because it picked up a PN Wiz on COM port 5, and it can tell it's a 4-channel amp. And so it lit up channel 1 with a green light versus or color versus channel 2, 3, and 4 because only 1 is plugged in. And so the BioExplorer design I'm using will look for signal continuity. And if the signal is not connected, the CH1 will go red. And right now we're in playback mode, upper left. So let me actually put us in capture mode. And then I'm going to hit play. Actually, let me change the timer because maybe I'll talk for more than 10 minutes or 12 minutes. Whatever. All right, so now I'm going to play some EEG. We got EEG? Not really. We have an issue. So those of you who know EEG, who can tell me what's happening? Oops. You see what's happening? My EEG, my head's in the way. Let me wait for that. We have a very slow-moving trace. What that means is my amplifier is in the wrong mode. It's in a 4-channel mode, and it wants to be running 1 channel only, and it's sampling some other channel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for the BioExplorer driver window, which is usually in the background. Let me see here. It's not. Huh. So here's my little, okay. Does look like my amp's in a weird state. So the easiest way to fix that is probably just to remount the amp's USB. Whoops. Sorry, I have too many things on the screen. There we go. I'm just going to take the amplifier and troubleshoot it the old-fashioned way by unmounting it. Now it says no port, and then remounting it. It should say connected. There we go. Aha, now CH1 and CH2 lit up, telling me it's in 2-channel mode. And the amplifier now baseline, went into 1-channel mode. Good, let's see if that works now. For some reason, I don't have good signals. Well, I have another amp. I have a 2-channel amp sitting right here, so I'm just going to swap it out. I think what's going on is my other software might be, I think I have more than one piece of software trying to grab the amp, and that could be causing trouble. And without rebooting, it may be difficult to solve. So we'll see what happens. We might be changing topics a tiny bit tonight. If this doesn't work, we'll see. Let me unplug my amp. So I've shifted over to an old school and the same color outs. So let me plug in the red minus black, and then green. So I think that BioExplorer is in a weird mode, and that usually means that there's another piece of software that's also grabbing the amps. So let me just look and see. Eager's not running. Let me see what the design is doing. Save. Can I play that? Stop. You seem to have the same. Oh, it's a different port. 1 second. So I changed amplifiers. I'm going to right click, go to properties, look for the other COM port. There it is on COM 6. We connect. Interesting. It still thinks it's in 4-channel mode. I think that I'm going to quit BioExplorer, then reopen it. I think what's happening is the driver control for the amplifier. There it goes. I saw it in the upper left. Aha, you see up here in the upper left, this little window? This is the control panel for the amplifier, the driver window. I've been building my own one of these on Mac recently, and the amp's in a weird mode. It's in impedance mode. I think that's probably my fault. In my software I'm building, I'm playing with driver commands, and I think I put it in an impedance mode. Let me turn it off, put it in regular EEG mode. There we go. And then I think that'll work. Let me open up my design again. Design, open. And I think I was using this one. All right, so now let's try this again. Okay, so there we have EEG. So I'll let that scroll for a second while I go and see if you guys have any questions. I did try turning it off and on again, Chad. Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, the issue was that it was in impedance driver mode and it was being persisted across the amp being rebooted for some reason. That must be a setting in BioExplorer that it was capturing. So guys, as you can see, now I have brainwaves scrolling across the screen. If I move, you can tell it's really me sitting here talking. And you can see that line of noise there across the bottom. So what I've done is I set up a few different things for you. One is, move this over a tiny bit here. One is the white squiggle is the raw signal. So everything coming off my head right now is in that white trace. And that includes muscle tension and noise and movement, as well as actual brain waves. And I'm filtering out different frequencies of brainwave in all of the traces below. And the green squiggle, the green trace, is theta brainwaves. Now, these are all a little bit small. I was playing with this earlier. Let me go and scale this. The active wire is at PZ right now, El Chatterino. But I'm going to scale these traces a little bit because I was setting this up on demo data. So I'm going to scale to 20, not in the raw, on all the rest. They're all at 50 microvolts. I'm going to scale them down to 20. There's 20. I'm at that one. I'm going to leave theta at 20. I'm going to scale the alpha down to 20. There we go. So this light blue one that's the top of 3 is all of alpha, 8 to 12. And then the ones below it are the other sub-frequencies of alpha. So if you look at the screen in a moment, once I close this box, let me leave that one high. So I've scaled the 3 alpha waves, the blue traces, down to 20 microvolts, which makes them pretty big. And the difference between those 3 squiggles is the top one is 8 to 12 hertz. And the other ones are 8 to 10 and 10 to 12. So we're looking at 3 different alpha waves. So the overall amplitude of this top alpha is, you can see 7 point, 6.9, 7.3. The top of the 3 blue boxes is that top amplitude. A little burst of alpha happening there. But then I'm getting different amplitudes in the other brain waves. And then below the squiggles, you can see I have 2 different panels showing. There's one slowly scrolling up on the left. That's showing bursts of amplitude over time. So if I add some noise, you can see it's going to be a horizontal yellow streak now through the amplitudes. The scale is set to 20 microvolts for that amplitude. So the white streaks are 20 microvolts. And then on the right-hand side, we have momentary instantaneous measurements of each 1 hertz wide frequency bin. And so in this case, we're looking at the percent of power. So I'm looking at power, not amplitude. What power is amplitude squared, brainwaves squared. That's why it has this like slope to it. It creates this pattern where slower brainwaves are bigger and faster brainwaves are smaller. Now, what should happen when I close my eyes in a second, what you should see is about 10 hertz. You should see a 10 hertz wave jump out, and that should show up in a few different ways. It should show up down here in this bottom right panel, the instantaneous, as hopefully a spike of blue right there. It should show up on this scrolling as maybe a 10 hertz vertical stripe if we're lucky. And you might see the waves up here in the blue change. So why don't we give me 5 or 10 seconds of silence on a YouTube video and see what happens to my alpha. Okay, I opened my eyes. There it was. So you can see I got that little blue. I caught the edge of it, little spike of blue, and only a little bit. It wasn't super high amplitude, but I saw it for a second. So maybe those of you guys who had your eyes open can tell me what you thought. But essentially, you can see my alpha production in my posterior cingulate and my visual tissue, all the tissue around the back midline going up. And you can see what speed my alpha is based on the tallest spike in that blue and purple region. So as I'm sitting here closing my eyes, you can see a little spike there. Now it's gone because I opened my eyes and my visual tissue is shutting off the alpha to process vision. I also have one of those silly YouTube ring lights in my eyes too. So that's not doing my alpha any favors, having bright light sent in. So the alphas are useful phenomena, and you can think about it in many different ways in the brain. And, you know, again, an idling frequency or a resting frequency, the cortical processing frequency, is sort of the core thought. But because of that, there's several ways you can interpret how it acts. In the left hemisphere, for instance, where language production is usually resident, the synchronization of alpha between the regions will indicate things like how well you can hand off information. Or if you're not synchronized, you can predict things like word finding issues, tip of the tongue, delayed recall, that kind of stuff. You can look at the work of Richie Davidson looking at frontal alpha, frontal asymmetry, where more alpha dominant on the left means that tissue is less active than typical, and less alpha on the right means that tissue is more active than is typical, and that's the opposite. So when the right drives and the left follows, we end up with this avoidant, depressive, negative style that creeps in. And when the left drives, we're sort of buoyant and, you know, into stuff. So having the ability to pump the brakes and shut off the alpha on the left front gives us the ability to feel positive, to approach, to initiate behavior, to stay on task, that kind of stuff. As we move to the back part of the left frontal lobe, we end up with the precentral gyrus, and it making alpha gets in the way of sleep quality, gets in the way of sustained attention, i.e. ADD, that kind of stuff. El Chatterino's asking, so when you look at the alpha broken up like that, if you see a lot of amps in the low alpha and theta range, you know there's more of an issue in the lower end with consolidation. Yeah, exactly. So if you see the issues, you know, if you, on a QEEG, you should look at alpha 1 versus alpha 2 in the flat maps, but you can see it in the raw as well. And you should look at the raw in someone's eyes closed alpha and look for the shape of the alpha. You know, the speeds are useful here for this experiment. You can tell that I'm making different alphas within that same alpha range. You can see the shape differences. You can see how they're not exactly matching. They're not exactly in phase. Kind of some cool overlapping alpha frequencies that I'm making. And they have different functional significance. But when you're thinking about when one person's alpha is doing, you should look at their raw EEG and also look at the shape of it. Because the alpha shaped waves, the 10 hertz waves that are shaped round at the top, mean something different than an alpha hertz that's also got like or an alpha shaped wave that has a spike or a sharp at the top. And if you have sharp waves riding on top of alpha waves, that's an anxious alpha. You can also have alpha that will speed up and slow down. So you can see here in this blue trace, the top blue trace, that it's changing pretty quickly, but the waves below it, the two blues below it, are changing a little bit less quickly. So you're seeing the interference of the two alpha waves and the power showing up in that top blue. So they're not exactly synchronous in the 8 to 10 and the 10 to 12, which again, one would expect if they're doing different things, with 8 to 10 as a preparatory and 10 to 12 as a more, 10 to 12 is preparatory, 8 to 12 is an idling frequency. So I've mentioned the left side front for mood and approach, left side mid for sustained attention. There's areas involved in the back left for receptive language. If you don't make much alpha back there, you may have a hard time picking out speech with any background noise because you can't synchronize the information circuits to the background information. And on the right, again, low front alpha means negativity, avoidance for some people, can mean anger. Behind the right ear, we end up with low alpha, and we have some sensory and social loading for some of us. On the singulates I mentioned already, front midline, we get obsessive. Back midline, we can get ruminative. If the alpha slows down because of illness, injury, or aging, we end up with word finding issues. The alpha speed is not just word finding, that's more of the synchronization within the hemisphere, but the overall speed correlates and tracks pretty strongly with IQ. So IQ is kind of an artificial construct that really measures what IQ tests specify. So it's, again, circular. But there's some physiology you can measure, or performance you can measure, that can sort of explain the variability, the variance, or the effect of IQ in most tests. And those three things are speed of processing, which is the alpha speed, working memory ability, or how well you can hold things in your mind, and implicit learning, how well you can extract the rules and see the patterns without being told, just kind of know the information, know the way things are arranged. And those three things together explain, if you will, everything we call IQ. And it's hard to manipulate working memory. It's a little hard to manipulate. We don't quite know how to handle implicit learning, but speed of processing is alpha speed. And so things like meditation will keep alpha speed up across aging so it doesn't drop, or speed it back up. Or I could be rewarding faster alpha at the back of my head right now and ignoring the slightly slower, and that would drag my resting alpha speed up. If I was doing it in BioExplorer, I would set a pair of thresholds and reward just above where I am and below where fast alpha kicks in. So these things can be problematic, having lots of alpha, or it can be a normal variant. People are sort of weird. So you shouldn't worry about a particular data point. You should always correlate it with other things you care about. Like left side mid central alpha is usually inattentive with poor sleep maintenance. But if you don't perform poorly on an attention test and you don't wake up all night long, well, guess what? It's probably not. It's maybe typical for you. Maybe you're a stoner. Lots of chronic cannabis use can leave, for some people, alpha a little bit high all the time. That happens. It's not as common as you would think. It doesn't seem to always happen, but it can. So, lack of deep sleep also drives up alpha. If somebody comes into my office and they haven't been sleeping quite as well, sometimes there's a global alpha power that's climbed and people sort of feel unrested, but also sort of hollow and worn out. And that's an alpha poor quality. The alpha is kind of yoked up or stuck together everywhere. You'll see low phase lag or hypercoherence in the alpha everywhere. It's often a little bit high amplitude, and the person's not getting good rest or sleeping. So again, attention, sleep, mood, speed of processing, intelligence. There's a huge number of factors here in terms of the alpha. And alpha was among the first brain waves we kind of thought about doing neurofeedback on. I often talk about Dr. Barry Sterman in the mid 60s at UCLA, doing work on cats, looking at SMR. But about the same time up at, I think it was Berkeley, but it could have been UCSF, was Dr. Joe Kamiya, who was looking at human alpha training with, Berkeley, probably a bunch of hippies, but he's looking at voluntary training of alpha. And soon after, we had In the 70s and 80s, we had Doug Quirk doing work in Canada with incarcerated felons who were violent, looking at recidivism rates. And about the same time, Eugene Peniston was doing work with alcoholism, looking at relapse rates. And Peniston was doing work in alpha theta. And Doug Quirk, I think he was also doing alpha theta, where you reward alpha and reward theta. And then there's a crossover moment where the alpha drops away and the theta takes off. It's a hypnagogic sort of access consciousness, turning your mind off kind of moment, allowing insight and receptiveness to kind of creep in. And both Doug Quirk and Eugene Peniston and Peniston-Kowalski, found that the 1 year either relapse rate or recidivism rate for alcohol or incarceration was flipped. It went from 75% down to 25%, I believe, in both of those populations with alpha training, alpha theta. And then in the 80s, Dr. Gary Schumer in Southern California did a study looking at multiple interventions with populations of people that were immunocompromised with HIV. And this is before there were any treatments, before there were any retrovirals or anything else. And he was looking at cranial electrostim, neurofeedback, and there's one other intervention that I'm forgetting now. But essentially it was a bunch of active groups and you were comparing the effect, and two of the groups had neurofeedback. I think one had CES and or electrostim and neurofeedback, one had neurofeedback, and one had something else. And the groups that received neurofeedback had a significant change in T cells, in CD4 plus cells, natural T killer cells, and the educated cells. There seemed to be this fairly sophisticated and significant immune response in people who had this alpha training, eyes closed alpha training. And I've seen people, clients of mine, who've been immunocompromised and have done the alpha theta work for creativity and have seen an immune response, a measurable immune response from that protocol as well. So it seems to be that alpha in general can really create this healing response in some people, which is pretty cool. So there's a lot of different alphas, they're not all the same. And being able to make them when you want and shut them off when you want is sort of the goal. Let's see. What else do I have to talk about for alpha? Guys, ask me questions if you have any. I see we have lots of people on. Hello, everyone. We have alpha peak frequencies, which I talked about for IQ and aging. We have alpha's role with attention gating and ADD and ADHD. Speed of processing, which affects short-term memory, word retrieval, and coding, how rapidly you think. We have alpha mood asymmetry. Oh, also in pain. Right front and right central areas seem to make weaker alpha and respond well to rewarding alpha neurofeedback to create pain relief. I've had a lot of clients who I've worked with who've had chronic pain phenomena, and just out of desperation, we go after features in the brain we see. And if you squash extra fast betas and bring up alpha on the right side in a couple different locations, you create a very significant, noticeable pain relief immediately for many people. And it builds as you repeat the protocol. It doesn't work perfectly. Many things in neurofeedback just kind of work the way we expect them to. And this is a bit hit or miss. But I know we have some providers on this chat right now. So FZ minus C4 beta down, like a broad beta down, 12 to 18, probably a theta inhibit as well. And half a session of that followed by a CZSMR. Works beautifully for pain. So does a C4 minus A2 with a broad slow inhibit, 1 to 7, a fast alpha, 8 to 11 reward, and a 15 to 30 inhibit, wide inhibit, sort of Othmer style, old school regulatory stuff. Again, split it up with an SMR like CZ. If that was all complete Greek to you, come see me and I'll teach you to do this on yourself ideally, and then you can do it with other people if you wish. But no, I wanted to rattle off. I know there's a couple folks watching that I talk a lot to who would want to pick my brain about pain protocols. So now you can just watch the video. Let's see. Hey, Radar Ashwood, nice to see you. What if my immune system is too powerful, like an autoimmune tendency? It's a great question. I think autoimmune things are often a sensitized system that's really, really overactive. And I've worked with people that have things like autoimmune phenomena like eczema and strong allergies, or MCAS, mast cell activation phenomena. And neurofeedback does seem to quell those phenomena, seems to relax those phenomena. So I think when a system is overactivated, I think the plasticity effects might dominate and let it settle back down. I would say though, if you have some rare condition where T cells, specifically T cells, the ratio of T cells to other cells, the NK cells, the CD4 plus cells, if for some reason there's a condition where those things are in high gear, then given what the literature says about that being the primary impact of alpha training, you might not want to do that alpha training. But that's a great question for your immunologist or your neuroimmunologist. Have that person talk to me. I'm always happy to be on people's team. But my hunch is you would get a benefit regardless, even if you have some extra active immune system. Radar is asking, is that C4A2 alpha protocol I just rattled off rewarding 8 to 11 and eyes closed? It is not. Great question. It's actually eyes open. The rule of thumb I use is that if you're rewarding below 10 hertz, you would generally do it eyes closed because that's the cortical alpha, the idling frequency that comes up so strongly. And if you're rewarding above 10 hertz, it should be eyes open generally. And that's true of alpha as well. So in this case, you could do a C4A2 8 to 11 reward eyes open or eyes closed. It does straddle that rule and you can use it that way. What I would say is I would normally do this eyes open. I wouldn't expect this one to need eyes closed. I also got to say that that really broad top inhibit, that 15 to 30, can make you feel dumb. Like it's very short-lived, but it can like, shut off your mind a little bit. So I will often hedge and not go all the way down to 15. Do like 18 to 30 or 20 to 32 or something. Some of that might be dependent on what kind of beta spindles we get and kind of beta hypercoherence we get or cross-frequency coupling between beta and theta. And generally, you'll see those couplings not just at C4, but between FZ and C4. And in that case, the down training is likely to work a lot better. When it's systemic, lifelong, chronic pain, ortho pain, musculoskeletal, inflammatory pain, mast cell pain, Ehlers-Danlos pain, then things that are more at C4A2 seem to be as or maybe more impactful. But I would look at the EEG, not for something to target at C4A2, but just to see if there's something that might be more specific at like an FZ minus C4 down training to break up the hypercoherence in the beta spindling ranges, basically. I hope that was useful. That was BioExplorer tonight, guys. I hope you enjoyed looking at it a little bit. It can be a little hard to get. It's kind of long in the tooth. You can still buy it from the vendor, and it works pretty well. It's a little bit less performant than all of the clinical packages. It runs a little slower. You saw that I was able to like break it by just not starting it properly, and I had to go troubleshoot for a second. It's a little bit like not the software you want to use for training yourself day in, day out, or training other people. It's a fine piece of software to muck about with, to create some sample designs, or to do what I'm doing, which is not training, which requires precise timing, but visualization of data. That's just fine because the jitter, the lags don't matter at all in visualization, only in feedback. El Chatterino is telling us that it works. What works? The protocol, are you trying it now? Are you inhibiting beta at C4? Is that what you're doing right this very moment? Oh, BioExplorer works. Yeah. See, you said bit janky, and I instantly knew you were talking about BioExplorer because it's janky. Radar Ashwood saying, so the eyes closed at 10 hertz rule applies all over the head, even if I'm training up alpha at a site like FZ. I can't see any reason to train up alpha at FZ. Not one. If you had low alpha at FC, I would still not train it up at FZ. I don't think alpha, like there's things that I rarely train up, and frontal alpha, I try to avoid. Frontal theta, almost the same. Like the slow brain waves, you generally don't want to reward in the frontal areas. They're much more made naturally and, healthily, if you will, in the back of the head. So I would generally do eyes closed, back of the head stuff. El Chatarino, you don't do EEG on yourself? Why not? You're like Mr. Geek with all this stuff, telling us every little bit of information all the time about these features. You don't train yourself? I think it's a lost opportunity. Everyone who works on their own brain, on brain should look at their own brain and train it. Now, I have this opinion that we should all be training our brains to optimize. We should learn our brains. We should know our brains. Neurofeedback is not about fixing yourself per se. It's about taking control. And that can be for performance or suffering or just for fun. So, you can have experiences of gently pushing your brain around and gently learn some things about it. So, I learned a little bit about my own alpha tonight. El Chatarino saying, content with the setup? Okay, 20 years of EEG. All right, sounds good. Sounds good. So that was my little show and tell tonight, guys. Thanks for participating. I really appreciate everyone showing up and learning about alpha. I think I'm going to take this article and flesh it out a little bit. I'll put the link in the notes later on tonight. And over the next week or two, I'll create a more scripted one with some animations or something and some video to narrate, so it's a more concise set of alpha features. Radar is asking us, any idea why training ILF, infra low frequency at T3 and T4 would increase theta at FC and CZ? I mean, I don't train infra low frequencies because it's a black art. But the short answer is there's a connection between mid-temporal locations and FZ. And there's a connection between FZ and PZ. So, it's very common to have a co-dysregulation between FZ and T4 or FZ and T6. And you'll usually see that in theta, sometimes in alpha, sometimes in beta, different failure modes. You usually see it in coherence as well as amplitude. So it's not unusual to see like high theta at FZ, high beta at T6, and then you'll see high beta coherence and theta coherence between them. Fairly common phenomena. And in that kind of case, if you go after a circuit that is tied to another circuit and you train the mid-temporals down, you may decouple those, properly or not, may decouple those from the front midline. And so you're asking why theta goes up. You probably have extra theta already at FZ and PZ. And my guess is you probably have a hypercoherence in beta between FZ and T4. And doing the ILF broke up the coherence, released FZ, and suddenly FZ and PZ both are pumping out more theta. I'm hand waving, but that's a way it could happen. You can tell me if that seems like it makes some sense. What does failure mode mean? These modules in the cortex that we can see on a brain map and that we conceptualize about, these functional modules, the rich hubs, the rich clubs, the triple network, attention, salience, default mode, etc. These systems are very modular. These have very rich groups of tissue with organized behavior, primary behavior in some ways, meaning they do a job. And they tend to fall over in different modes. So you can have a failure mode of the anterior cingulate where it's making no alpha. Or a failure mode of the anterior cingulate where it's stuck in super high amplitude beta. Or a failure mode where you're pumping out tons of front midline theta. So those can all look different on an EEG. They can all look different behaviorally, but they do have a lot of overlap experientially and behaviorally. So, front midline theta can mean song stuck in your head or biting your nails. And front midline beta might mean intrusive thoughts and obsessive classic OCD, but they're both tics. They're both obsessive, hyper-focus types of things. So, sounds plausible? Okay, cool. I appreciate that. Well, guys, thanks so much for hanging out tonight. I really enjoyed answering questions and showing you a little bit of EEG. If you have any other questions, lay them on me now before we break. I'll give you a few more minutes to get them in. Hey, Elliot, nice to see you. You've read about alpha training for peak performance with archers and golfers. What's my favorite peak performance protocol? So here's a thing about alpha. When doing neurofeedback on alpha, you've got to be a little cautious because it tends to push back. It is the central frequency, the idling frequency, the frequency on which many other frequencies depend and descend. You know, if your alpha is slow, so is your beta, so is your theta. So the thing about alpha is it doesn't really enjoy or respond well to being aggressively pushed on with neurofeedback. You can take theta and squash it. You can take beta and squash it or raise it in a linear way. But alpha will often, not always, but will often rebound where you train it up in one direction and it responds, and then it goes really hard in the other direction really suddenly, you know, over an hour or two later. So you got to be a little careful. Look at the EEG and figure out, is there something else in that region that you want to work on alpha that's in the way? Is theta high? Is beta too high? Is alpha low? You may want to reward alpha if it's low, but if it's not, you're likely to get more mileage, meaning more speeding up of the alpha, you know, more powerful and fast alpha, which is high performance. Also, alpha you can shut off when you want to. That's high performance as well, if you get other things out of the way. So you might want to do something like a 4 to 7 inhibit and a 20 to 32 inhibit for high betas back there. But you also might want to look at the EEG and figure out, oh, look at this. This person has, you know, beta spindles in the 18 to 21 hertz range, or they've got a 15 to 18, you know, fast beta, or they have a 2 to 5 hertz excess sort of delta type, you know, phenomena back there. Figure out what's going on and see if you can't ease up the alpha speed by moving things out of its way. And then if there's nothing obvious there, then you can actually go after beta and bring the alpha up. You can do like a C4 minus PZ and reward 11.5 or 12 hertz, and you'll bring up that fast alpha frequency. So again, look at the EEG first, because if your alpha power is low, if you have other failure modes happening in the singulates, and you reward beta, you're going to not enjoy it. It's going to feel really unsettling, very, you know, fear-provoking. But if you don't have any issues at all there, you may really enjoy doing 11.5 or 12 hertz reward at PZ. And that's going to have the quality of bringing up the SMR tone at C4 and bringing up the fast alpha at PZ at the same time. C4 minus PZ as the montage. So it's a low beta training, or arguably an SMR training because it's on the SMR strip. But it's really doing a fast alpha training is the theory. And it can work for some people. Hope that answered your question, Elliot. That will help with reaction time and visual acuity. So that particular peak performance alpha protocol, C4 minus PZ beta, does create a visual performance benefit that my athletes notice, my golfers, baseball players, hockey players. They notice the visual kind of loading up, the clarity, the sharpness by doing C4 minus PZ. So let's see. El Chatarino asks, so different than dysregulated safe modes. Yeah, I don't really think of the tissue moving into safe mode unless it's injured or idling aggressively. Like, things can be stuck in alpha, but usually that's not like the brain being in a safe mode, like hyperperfused. Usually it's the tissue being dysregulated, like it can't shift out of that mode. And it's not because of the alpha necessarily. It's because your theta is too high or the beta is too depleted, producing a surge in alpha because of fatigue, something. So alpha is often responding to something else. So be a little bit cautious before you reach in and try to manipulate alpha directly. Hey, Ilya. Ilya's sharing C4PZ is very tangible for you. Good job. Calming yet focusing. Yeah. So you're getting the beta at C4 and the fast alpha probably at PZ. And it's probably producing like a calming, but like sharpening and distilling kind of mode for you, if I had to guess. Hey, Sonia. Since neurofeedback is subconsciously done, I wonder what makes the brain care about producing intended brain waves. It could be indifferent to making desired waves, right? Exactly. Yeah, very, very astute. So here's how that works. First of all, we're only giving the brain feedback or applause for some things. We're ignoring other things it's doing. And if we ignore most of what it's doing and applaud one little tiny thing, it notices that. Secondly, we move the goalposts. So we put the computer next to where the brain already is. It's making some theta, it's making some delta. It's not making none. So whatever you're manipulating, you put the threshold, the computer right next to where the brain is, and then wait for the brain to briefly move on its own. If you're making tons of alpha and you want to train it down, then your threshold's pretty strong. But if you make medium amounts and you want to train it down, the threshold's someplace else. So part of neurofeedback is the thresholding or the computer adjusting as it goes to keep the computer next to the person and wait for that brain to flex itself in the proper direction. And then that produces that learning over time because the brain figures out, hey, wait, only alpha makes stuff happen when I make alpha back there? Oh, okay. And then it starts to make more alpha because it doesn't care about the alpha. It notices the outside world changing. It's more information from that circuit. So it's a richness, only because information is more rewarding than no information, full stop. Even if that information you're getting is annoying or negative or adversive, it's still information, and the brain prefers that over a lack of signal. That's the short answer. Yeah. Ilya is saying intended brainwaves are just those that have feedback stimulus. Yeah, we're making lots of brainwaves all the time. So it's more about which ones we're parameterizing, which ones we're actually measuring and saying, ooh, yeah, let's respond to this one to gently drag it up or drag it down. But yeah, you basically could do all kinds of things. If you can measure it, you can train it. Hey, Joe Barr, could you trick your brain into neurofeedback not working by telling yourself the feedback or beeps are bad? You could not. Yeah, because the brain wouldn't listen to the mind. You probably have some experience of that happening, the brain not listening to the mind. But in this case, you're only getting beeps for the desired outcome, the desired brainwave, and you're not getting beeps for the other 99.999% of things happening in the brain. And the brain notices that and goes, whoa. And I've actually had people be like, I don't like that sound, and still get training effects. Or teenagers be like, I don't want to be here. I don't like this, and ignore it all, or like tell us they don't like it and still get training effects. So it's mostly involuntary. I mean, Sturman's work on cats are really bad instruction followers. And while they enjoyed the chicken broth, I'm sure, they weren't able to like voluntarily control seizures that way. So it's very much an involuntary operant conditioning. I've done a lot of work on people that are nonverbal, that are self-stimming, that are, screaming, that are having a really hard time with any human communication. They get effects. Margaret Ayers, before she passed, a lot of her career was going to coma bedsides and doing neurofeedback on coma patients and seeing brain changes. So it's very much an operant conditioning on the brain, not the mind. And the brain would prefer to have input over lack of input. And so we just got to parameterize some brain activity and applaud it, and the brain will do the rest, actually. It's kind of cool in that way. So you're welcome, Sonia, and everyone else. You guys, thanks so much for showing up tonight. I appreciate hanging out and chatting with you a little bit. Let me know if there's other topics you want to get after and want to learn more about. Please do me a favor and like and subscribe this and another video. If you feel so called, share a video out in other social networks so Google would come find our videos. El Chatarino has a question: hardware config versus software. I'm not sure what you mean by that, El Chatarino. You may have to clarify for me. Either way, I'll be back next week, next Monday at 6. Probably back to Eager unless I manage to finish off my own HEG software, and then I'll show you guys that. I'm trying to get some HEG software, but it's probably a few weeks yet because I got to prioritize some other stuff. If you need a brain map, come see us at Peak Brain. We have offices in Los Angeles, Orange County, California, as well as St. Louis and New York City, plus London and Stockholm. And if you're checking this out on podcasts or this YouTube, you can ask for a 50% discount, and you get very low cost brain mapping. It's $250 once a year, US dollars in the US offices, equivalent prices overseas. And you can get brain maps done in the US unlimited and a one-off in our offices overseas. So it ends up being a really cost-effective way to look at your brain. And if you're not near an office, you can still work with us. We're running a special for just a couple more hours where we have discount remote brain maps where you can get a remote kit sent out to you and coaches guiding you through doing brain mapping. So if you want to do that, let me know. In theory, that's running, that sale's ending tonight. But if you ask me, I will extend it. So Chatterino is clarifying that the hardware versus software is operant conditioning versus the mind. No, I would say it's just not the conscious mind. It's still the brain learning. There's still an information processing thing happening. It's an information adaptation, and it's an associative learning thing happening. It's just not happening at the level of the mind. So it's kind of like the firmware, let's say, if we had to give it a metaphor. All right, guys. Well, you have a lovely evening. Nice talking to you all. I hope you got something out of it. I will talk to you all soon.